Aloha friends, and welcome back to the low carb cruise. It's early in the morning, excuse my throat, but I'm so excited because I invited Jessyca to come talk to us about something very personal, emotional, something that I think a lot more people deal with it than we talk about. And kind of like a taboo thing. When I first met you, I think it was one of the first low carb cruises, maybe 10 years ago.
It was a long time ago, yeah.
And I was just like, what? Nobody's talking about this. And I think we all kind of have a little bit of food addiction. Like, I'm just gonna throw this out here. My husband Craig said, oh, I'm not addicted to anything, but he doesn't want to cut dairy out. I'm like, well then, that's an issue, right?
If it has a hold on you,
yeah.
and there's some part of you that knows you need to change it, but you really can't, then yeah.
Well, for his autoimmune issue. And he's cut it out for a little bit. I was like, well,
yeah.
Did you feel better then?
Right.
You know?
Right.
But we live in Wisconsin and it's like this thing, but that's why I'm like an all or nothing person. I am not the keto treats or anything like that.
I don't do those either.
It's just, I feel I'm in my safe zone and I like my safe zone. But okay, anyway, everybody, Jessyca is amazing. You are a health coach. Basically, maybe your specialty is binge eating or eating disorders?
It's more compulsive and emotional eating. I think that my own story is I struggled with bulimia and anorexia, and but I got to the point even where I had switched to keto and even carnivore, and I still struggled with overeating. A lot of people come to me and they've been told, you know, if you just switch the way you eat, you're not going to struggle anymore. And I found that I could still binge eat shrimp. I could eat pounds and pounds of shrimp or beef or something like that. And people come to me and they feel disappointed. And that's where I really started to zero in on emotional and compulsive eating, because you don't have to feel hungry to eat in response to emotion. You don't have to feel hungry. So keto or carnivore takes care of your natural hunger, but that compulsion to eat because it's a certain time of day or because you're in a familiar situation where you have always eaten, that is so strong it overrides your hunger signal. So I really help people work through that a lot.
Do you find like there's a trigger? Because, okay, we sit down and have some shrimp, but what's going to trigger you to just keep going? Is it a bad day or?
Well, it depends. So that's really what's so interesting. Emotional eating is related to feelings. It can be celebratory. Because, you know, maybe in the past, in your family, you've always celebrated with food and you don't know another way. So it just that feeling of, I feel like celebrating means food. But then sometimes it's not related to feelings. It really is a compulsion related to when I'm around a certain person, we've always eaten together, or we've always binged together, or whenever I go to a certain place, this is the thing that I've always done. And so disconnecting the behavior from the place. I use the example of this really became highlighted to me. I had a client who was doing very well, but every time he would leave work, he would struggle with kind of sneaking and buying food and eating it in his car. And I was trying to zero in on, how are you feeling? What happened at work that made you feel emotional? And it was nothing. He was like, no, I don't feel anything. And I really discovered that just the act of being in the car by himself, the car is the trigger.
Wow.
So the trigger sometimes is not a feeling at all. It's a place, it's a time of day, it's a situation, sometimes even a person. And becoming aware of that and speaking out loud. You know, I had him say repeatedly, I don't eat in my car. I never eat in my car.
Yeah.
This is not what I do. I never eat in my car. And he did that for several weeks and it got him through. And what happens is, so in his case, his wife gets in the car and she's like, hey, can we stop by a drive-thru? And he's like, I don't eat in my car. That new messaging, the messaging just overrides the old thing because you've heard yourself say it. And I believe we believe what we hear ourselves say more than what we believe other people, that what they say.
Oh yeah, what you tell in your brain, like whether it's out loud or like in there.
Yeah.
Well, what was so interesting is this is not this year, but I was by the pool with kids were in the pool on the low carb cruise, and a woman sat next to me, and she was very friendly, and we just started chatting because her kids are playing with my kids. And she said, I'm a drug addict. And I was like, oh. And she's like, I'm clean right now. She said, do you know what the hardest thing is every day I would like steal money or somehow get money to get my fix, to get the drugs, to, you know, start all over again. She's like, that's what my days were. And she's like, I'm having a hard time replacing those habits.
Right.
She's like, even though I don't want to do it, it was like, that's what I did. I don't know what else to do. And I think that kind of correlates to food also. Like if you are, I grew up in a culture where you ate when you weren't hungry.
Right.
Like it didn't matter. You had a midnight snack, like all
Right.
so learning to eat when I was hungry, I had to like fill my time with activities. And then I found all these things that I love to do, but
Right.
it was kind of hard.
I think when food is the main thing in your life, even if you're, I would say, doing well, you've changed your lifestyle and you're doing well, but you're always still focused on it, there's something you're missing. When I spoke the other day, I spoke about this, and I believe it with all my heart. There is a reason we're all alive. We have a unique purpose. Some people don't believe that, and I say, look down at your hands. Your fingerprints are unique. No one has ever had these fingerprints. They never have, they never will. It is evidence of your uniqueness. When food is our main thing, either because of our family or culture or what you've gotten used to, you're missing what that thing is.
Yeah.
It's a distraction from why you're here. And even though it's hard to sit with the absence of those old behaviors, what starts to happen is you start to download different things that are, I think they're there in you. You just haven't given yourself the quiet space to hear and feel what that calling is. It's there.
Do you think though that sometimes people are eating to shut their mind off of like what they're dealing with?
Yes.
Just like a moment of just quiet in their brain?
Well, it numbs it
Oh.
and it delays it. So, some people like to say, well, food doesn't do anything except for give you nutrition. That's not true. If it didn't work to numb our feelings, we wouldn't use it in that way. It does work. The problem is there's deception around that because it's a temporary thing. It will numb that feeling of loneliness or sadness or boredom or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But then it comes roaring back. I think it's even worse. It's almost like, I struggle with bulimia from age 11 to 41, and now I'll be 50 in 3 weeks. And so it's been almost 9 years of freedom.
Wow.
But it really was about pushing down the feeling, and then the purge was, release it. But the problem was it would come roaring back. And it was worse than before I numbed it.
Wow.
And then there's the consequence of having eaten, the consequence meaning I've gained weight, or I feel condemned or guilty or unwell in my body. So not only is it not worth it because it's not a long lasting way to numb,
Right.
you pay a price.
Right.
And when you're in the moment, you forget about the price you have to pay. And part of becoming aware is saying, do I want to pay the price?
Right.
And eventually, when you get well, the answer is no, I don't want to. I'd rather feel what I need to feel. I'd rather process that than at some point, everything requires you to process it and deal with it. It's going to come out there, and it just doesn't work long term.
Aloha friends, one of my very favorite things to do is go camping, and I love camping in Devil's Lake, Wisconsin. If you've ever been here, give a shout out. It's amazing. I already ran around the lake this morning, and now we're on a family hike around the lake. And to keep my energy up, I always pack Element with me. All you have to do is throw it into a bottle of water and shake it up. It's a natural Gatorade without sugar. And if you want to get a free sample with your order, they are so generous. If you go to drinkelement.com/KetoMaria, you can get a free sample with your order, and it's really good. We love the raspberry, we love the orange, the watermelon's good. They're all good, and even the chocolate. It makes a great hot chocolate after a long hike around a campfire. So check it out, drinkelement.com/KetoMaria. I found myself like I would be really good during the week, but like the weekends are really hard. And I didn't write down my journal, but I journaled a lot in my head. And I was like, so not that it would be only 15 minutes, but like for 15 minutes of pleasure of eating, I would feel awful for that whole next
Right.
week. And I was like, the gains versus the downsides wasn't like it wasn't equating, right? And so it just, for a while, it wasn't worth it. And that's how I was with alcohol too.
Yes.
I just don't know how to casual drink, so I just had to cut it out.
Yeah.
How do you feel? Food addiction is not in the dictionary. It's going to take a while.
Right.
How do you feel? Is food an addiction? And do you think it's a harder addiction than maybe alcohol? Because
So I think that food can be addictive, right? There are certain foods that have qualities
True.
that are actually meant to cause us to want
did you read the
more.
Dorito effect?
Yes.
Yeah, totally.
And so that is a real thing. But over time, I feel, and I use this word, and it's a very different word. I feel like food is more of a stronghold. When I think about addiction, I almost think about that every time I speak that, like, I'm addicted, I am saying, I am an addict. And so I'm always have this fear I'm going to revert back to the thing, to addict behavior.
This was my favorite thing about your speech when I first met you. You are not Ed.
It's not who you are. It isn't. And I refer to it these days as a stronghold. And I put up the definition of a stronghold. A stronghold is something that has taken root. It's deception that at some point has taken root in your mind.
Yeah.
And it was never true. So the feelings that we have about food say, I believe that when I have pain, food comforts me. At some point, that's not who I am. It is a false belief that at some point started. And I use the example of, maybe you fell down when you were a child and you scraped your knee and you were handed a cookie. So at that moment was the inception of a lie that when I have pain, sugary food makes me feel better. And so then after that, every single time I have pain, what do? I go and I seek out sugary food. And so that lie that I believe that sugar equals pain relief, it grows and grows and grows and grows and grows, and it's this huge thing. And then someone tries to tell me that it's not true. By the time you've done this for decades, it's really hard to say, wait, but I've always believed that. Just because you've always believed something doesn't mean that it is the truth. It was always a lie. The whole time it was a lie. And so I like to use the word stronghold because a stronghold is rooted in a lie. And it's always been a lie. It's just getting to that place where you recognize that.
Did you raise your children differently knowing this?
Well, my older daughter unfortunately didn't grow up with the wisdom that I have today, and she struggles with some things. And I don't have condemnation about that.
We're all learning.
I had a wonderful psychiatrist for 8 years who taught me, because I had such guilt with my older daughter about she didn't see the healthy side of me and this wisdom. And he said, you can't do a thing to undo anything you ever did as a parent, but every single day that you do the right thing and you show health and healing, you are making up for a day that you didn't do the right thing. And now it's so neat because this journey, now that it's been years and years, I feel like it's just every one of these good days makes up for multiple of the bad days.
We can't live in the past. We can't live in regret. We just have to move forward, being our better self, right?
And my younger daughter, Clara, has been on a ketogenic diet for 9 years, and so
she's a pioneer.
So she has grown up with that, just like you. Your children, know better, and so as we know better, we do better for our children.
But like what you were saying, how you can binge eat anything. Might get a little emotional. So when we adopted the boys, Ethiopia, they're hungry people. Right? And they were the nicest people. They made sure we ate before anybody else, and like they had nothing. When we brought the boys home, I don't know if I should even talk about this, but
you should.
My cousin, my older one, and he would get very excited when food would come. He would start singing and like. His bib, he'd kind of like do. We have videos of that. Where Kai, I personally stopped having dinner with them. because Kai would just scream for more food. Even though he was a tiny little baby, we had to teach him more food would always be there.
Right.
But when it would be gone, I know that belly was full.
Right.
I know it was
It
full.
was trauma attached to running out of food.
But he would scream for more food, and it was not like, it was a very stressful time in my life.
Well, it just shows you how early trauma starts around food. I mentioned that when I was 4, my mom took me to a child psychiatrist because I was writing numbers backwards and things like that. She thought I might have dyslexia. But when the doctor came out, he told my mom, she's obsessed with food. That was when I was 4.
What?
So when something had happened earlier than that, and your story is evidence of that too. By the way, I have such a heart for Africa. I went in November to Togo, and I will never be the same. I mean, just even the way we look at food and what we have. I mean, Africa
And they're so
has
happy.
my heart. They don't even know. Yeah.
They're so happy. And they don't have
Right.
the luxuries that we have.
They have
right?
nothing.
We didn't even have like showers most days because it
Right.
was like water would only work some days.
The rolling blackouts,
Yeah.
the power's out all the time, even just bathroom facilities, all those things. That is a life-changing thing if anybody ever has the opportunity. But even that will change the way you look at food too. It really does, and gratitude for what you have.
Absolutely. But like you said, you were only 4. I still see it in him. I still see it in him.
Well, think about that. What I was saying about a stronghold, it's a lie that you believe. And so as a child, if you believe that somehow at some point there's going to be a lack, it takes a lot of work to uproot that. You can tell yourself over and over, I don't live in lack, I don't live in lack, I don't live in lack, which is good.
Right.
But you almost have to go back and acknowledge, you know what? I did live in lack when I was a child, and that harmed me in some way. But you processing through that, and that's where therapy is good, because you can process through that and say, well, I understand where this comes from, but it does not have to rule me the rest of my life.
Right.
And that takes time.
Right, but I just think, like you said, if you just eat a certain way, you're not going to have those feelings. Like, he's been keto his whole life. But you can still overdo all the things.
Yes,
like,
you can.
You know,
You
one
have
is not enough. I have to have 5. And it's like, well, maybe we should start with 1, and maybe we can go do something else.
Right.
Like, kind of take the activities away from that. But I was also going to mention, now I have a brain fart. But, oh shoot. It's okay. We can just, I don't know if you had another. It was something so cool. I was gonna. It'll come to me, right?
It happens
It
to me
always
too.
happens so much. I have so many things on like what I wanted to talk to you about, but it's just like, thank you for letting me share that, because it was like a really hard time, and I haven't like talked to anybody about that. But like,
I think he probably needs to process with someone who's not his mom. He probably needs to, and because it is there is a root of deception about food, and it's picked up legitimately. You get a message even as a little kid that food means something, or and it sounds like for him, of course, that it's at some point there's going to be lack, and even though he's in an environment where there is no lack, he needs to revisit that and kind of just root it up.
Totally. It's just interesting how, we grow up with these beliefs, and I love how when you talked about, I remember what I was going to say too. I've worked with women and men that have gone to like the Emily program, which is pretty popular in Minnesota. It's the eating disorder clinic, and they force them to eat their scary food.
Oh yes.
And to me, that gives me anxiety.
It is. It's immersion therapy, and I was in 6 different eating disorder hospitals, so any sort of method that can be done, I have experienced.
How do you feel about that?
Well, it didn't work. It did not work. It was traumatizing. But I mean, I experienced that where you're forced to eat the foods that you say you don't want. That was not freedom. On the other hand, I was also exposed to one therapist who thought, if we just let you eat this thing until you're sick of it, This was,
Oh,
she had a
kind of
book.
like smoking cigarettes until
Yes,
you puke?
yes. Well, you know what? I might be sick of it. I'll move on to the next thing because it was really the behavior. It's the binge behavior, and that would still always come back to the thing. It did not work. But I mean, any kind of therapy. I think I had 30 plus therapists over the years. I tried to get better. I think that's evident from
Yeah.
all the hospitals
Right.
and therapists that have. It didn't work.
What worked?
Well, first it was switching my diet. That was first. And honestly, keto did something for my brain that allowed me to be open to healing. I think the way that I was eating before, I was a vegetarian for 14 years. Again, also I struggled very badly with anorexia, so I was malnourished. And I think I couldn't even think my way through to the truth. So what keto did for me was, it wasn't just, yes, at the time I was obese. It didn't just help me lose weight. It actually did something for my brain that I'd never experienced. I don't think I was fully nourished enough to even latch on to truth. So something unlocked in my brain when I switched the way I ate. It was both. It wasn't enough to have therapy. I tried that. It wasn't enough to go to the hospital. But the combination of switching the way that I eat, eliminating the sugar, eating real food, and pursuing freedom and truth, they came together. I needed both. It was nutrition plus therapy.
Yeah. And I love how I mentioned a little earlier in the first time I met you, like, I guess, do they call like Ed, like eating disorder?
Yeah.
And you're like, I am not Ed.
Right.
You are not Ed.
That's right.
Because like you were saying earlier, what you tell your brain, like you believe it, like, oh, I have an eating disorder.
Well, part of that is understanding, it's being able to separate your thoughts from sabotaging thoughts, right? So the way that I described Ed back in the day was, it is the voice of sabotage. Now I call it the enemy, because right, here's my thought and this is an enemy thought. And to divide my thought and enemy thought is very, very important. Now the enemy is sneaky because he speaks to you in your own voice. When you hear that in your mind, you think you're having a conversation with yourself. You're having a conversation with the enemy. I'm going to tell, this is something big. This is a revelation. I don't think I've ever said it to anybody publicly. Here's an easy tell when you think you're having a conversation with yourself, whether it's you or whether it's the enemy. The enemy always says you because he's an accuser. So when we think things, we think, I should go to the gym today. That would be good. The enemy says, you should eat. You should eat. You can, if you're trying to figure out, is this an enemy thought or is this my thought? He always uses second person, you, because he's the accuser. So that's an interesting and quick way to identify, because enemy thoughts are very powerful. They pull on those strongholds, those already deceptive beliefs that we have.
I've heard that.
And so if you can't quickly discern that it's the enemy, you will waste a lot of mental energy arguing with yourself, and oftentimes the enemy wins over time because you get exhausted. But if you quickly understand, wait a minute, that's not me, that is an enemy thought, it's going to lead to either distraction or destruction, then you can speak the truth over it. Because really, the truth is how we use our authority to tear down the enemy's lies.
I was thinking about it on the opposite end, like I would hear like, you don't need another one.
Yes.
You don't deserve another one.
Right.
You didn't earn another one.
Or even, not even just about food.
Right.
I mean, it's so many things. You should be ashamed because fill in the blank. It's anytime you hear that you, it's an accusation. It is, you is not you. That is the enemy every single time.
Wow.
Because we don't think of ourselves, you should. We think I, you know, and it's just a quick tell. You know, you look for tells, like, that's quickly the enemy. I can shut that down quick. I'm not even going to argue with that thought. I'm just going to say, that's not true.
Wow, that's really deep.
That's the neat thing about this journey. You have layers of revelation. And that's why what I say now versus 2 years ago is so different, because I continue to have these revelations. I'm not enough to say, well, here's my before and here's my after. There's no after. It's a continuous journey to greater levels and layers of freedom. And I always want to share that when I have the opportunity.
I like that you call it freedom.
Yeah.
How do you feel about, in this community, the keto carnivore community, they do a lot of whether it be intermittent fasting, extended fasting? Do you find that sets you up for, or anybody up for, a binge maybe?
So I have clients who, I believe in fasting as a technique. I believe there's some benefits in it. If you've struggled with disordered eating of any kind, not just anorexia, bulimia, but compulsive eating, any of those things, there are people that I meet with and I ask them to stop fasting, and they don't want to. They do not want to, because for them it is a form of bulimia. They eat and then they don't eat, and anytime you're trying
Feasting
to
and fasting, they call it, right?
But anytime, and I hate that. I hate those words in the community of people that have eating disorders, because feasting means an entirely different thing than to the normal eater. And anytime, I think this is important too, anytime you're trying to undo an eating an event, it is a bulimic activity. Whether it's over-exercising, whether it's fasting, whether it's using laxatives. You know, people think of bulimia as just purging, but fasting can be bulimic. And so there are people I ask to absolutely stop fasting, and they're like, can I ever do it? I'm like, we'll wait and see until you get to that layer of healing where it's not about that, where it's not about undoing something. And so I think it's important for a lot of people not to fast.
For me, I would do OMAD. I never went days without eating, but I would do OMAD, which is 1 meal a day. Some people are like, what is that? 1 meal a day. And I feel much better having 3 meals. And I'm not saying that's best for everybody, but it was always like, oh, I get to eat in a few hours. Like, I could get more then. Like, I don't, you know, it wasn't a feast to the point where I would feel sick.
It's the mindset though. So if you're eating 1 meal because, ooh, I can eat bulk food when I do eat, that's disordered, right? If you're eating 1 meal because you've studied the science, you have a lot of excess weight, and
But the more science I learn, the more that it's not the best. Because
I agree.
How you need the to signal protein synthesis for muscle building, which I lost a lot of muscle, and I was like, no, it's all about building muscle. So having a meal in the morning that's like at least like 45 grams of protein, that's what I aim for. And before, like not right before bed, but at dinner time, I aim for another 45 grams, and then there's another like 45 in the middle. So that's what I'm aiming for.
I'm at that place, you know, we're all on this journey of figuring things out, and I'm super into personal experimentation. I really, for me, 2 meals is good. I think I did OMAD for like a whole year, but it really was disordered, because it was like I can eat a lot all at one time. I get the bulk all at one time. I could eat 1,500 calories in 1 meal, and that was still disordered. But I don't think you're aware of it when you're doing it. You can justify it for a lot of different reasons. But as you say, you experiment, you realize you have muscle loss. You realize this is, you know, even just your motivation behind it, and then you shift. And but many people, I have to say, ask to stop fasting because it's their reasoning behind it that is really flawed.
And I do think that I see that a lot. Because it is like, you know, more, even if they didn't have like a eating disorder in the background, it is like, ooh, you know, I'm busy with work. I don't want to stop to eat because I'm just busy, and I'd like to just sit down and...
I see people overeat, or sometimes binge, or just really overeat ahead of a fast. And then when it's over, they binge or overeat. And I'm like, what did you really get out of that? You know? So,
nothing?
Right. But, or even damage, you know?
Damage, for sure. Have you heard of priming? In the carnivore community, it's called priming, where they don't limit calories. They encourage them to eat more food than not. I just talked to Dr. Sarah about this. And it's to make them have freedom from craving sugar, maybe. But they're often putting on like 20 pounds in a month. Like, it's a lot of food. But if you're not familiar with that,
Well, for me, again, I mean, I'm just hearing what you're saying now. I mean, I know about reverse dieting, which is like a bodybuilder thing, but you're saying...
No, adding slowly, like that's slowly. No, this is like kind of binging on carnivore food.
I think anytime we are doing something that's going to go against what your body's signals are, it's probably not a good thing. I'm not saying it doesn't work. I'm saying that that what we really want to do is rediscover our body's natural hunger and full reflexes. And that leptin and ghrelin, those hormones, have been severely damaged by overeating, by starving, all these things. And we really want to recover those and heal those. And I think when we forcibly overeat for whatever reason, it doesn't matter what the end goal is. For me, it's not something I would have people do who struggle with disordered eating.
It's just when I'm running tests, when people are doing that, their triglycerides are going through the roof, like their blood sugars are getting worse, even though they're not eating carbohydrates.
Yeah.
I just want people to know, like,
it doesn't, again, I don't know enough, but it doesn't seem wise to me.
No.
I can't say that it seems wise.
I guess the principle is to make you like not want sugar at all, which
I think you get off sugar,
right,
and it helps you not want it. From a physical standpoint, once you get it out of your system, it helps you not want it. But because of those strongholds that are rooted in what sugar does for you emotionally, you don't have to feel hungry to want sugar.
No.
And so in that case, that would not work.
Right.
You could eat all that.
Amen.
You don't have to be hungry to want sugar if sugar's related to emotion or compulsion.
Right.
So that wouldn't work.
just think about after a big meal. In the past, when dessert would come, sure, right? You know, you could always fit that in.
Well, that's why people always think at the end it can be completely stuffed full, and someone will bring out dessert. They'll be like, "Oh yes,"
sure,
because you don't have to be full. So by that thinking, then overeating protein and fat is not going to take that away. It's not going to take that desire away.
No, it won't. It won't. Wow.
People have to try things, though.
Okay, so one last question
Yeah.
before I take up too much of your time. How do you feel about maybe changing the environment? Because I remember on the first cruise, Wendy Myers admitted that she has been like paleo keto for a very long time, and the cruise set her up for a binge. Because here there's ice cream over there, there's food everywhere, and everybody's over consuming. Obviously we're all in our conference, but do you find different environment, not just necessarily the cruise, and I'm not trying to discourage people coming here, because we are in a safe environment here, for sure, but like Disney World, or because like we homeschool the children, we are introverts, we are in a safe bubble.
Same.
And then when they come here, they're like, whoa, look at all the food, right?
So I think in again, there's baby steps, and then there's levels of healing. I think in the beginning, when you are changing your lifestyle, you have to be very aware of what's going to come in your environment. This is something I have conversations about. People say, I've done well for 6 months. I feel good. I have them name all the things that are going well for them. And then we talk about what's coming up. You're going to Disney. You're going on a cruise. Discuss both the physical and emotional things that may happen. So Christmas, for example, not only are you going to be confronted with all these things that are available to you, there's going to be emotions, right? You see that cousin that you had a falling out with. There's strife sometimes among family members. There's other things that stir up that desire to eat. And so you almost have to go into it early on with the knowledge that you're going to have different struggles in those environments. I think you can get to a level of freedom and healing where you are not tempted. I don't care what environment you're put on, because you really are secure and strong in the fact that I've changed. I'm not who I was. And yesterday I was saying that freedom really is understanding I could take a bite of something and not lose my mind, but because I care so much about my body and I've healed so much.
Okay, we got cut off a little bit, but I do want everybody to know where we can find Jessyca. So do you have a website?
CoachJessica.com. It's Jessyca with a Y, Jessyca. One of my friends I hadn't seen in a few years, she texted me and she's like, do you ever think it's Jessyca with a Y, W-H-Y? I was like, yes, I love that. But
now they'll remember.
CoachJessica.com, but I have Facebook, Instagram, all the things.
But it's just your name, right, on Instagram and Facebook?
Yeah, Coach Jessyca. Yeah.
So check her out. We'll have the links below so you can, if you need some help, talk to someone that knows how to help you. Great. So,
awesome. Thank
mahalo,
you so
everybody.
much.
Join us on the low carb cruise next year.
Yes.
When I was 16 years old, I was diagnosed with PCOS, acid reflux, depression, and IBS. Instead of taking those prescription drugs, I decided to change my life with food. Yes, food healed me, and it's healed so many of my clients over the past 20 years of working with people. If you are interested in transforming your life, check out KetoMaria.com. I'd be honored to help you.